Okay. I was gonna start recording, but he sat up here and... Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. I do have my little dog here with me. His name is Bruce. I don't know how long he's gonna sit up here, but wanted to go ahead and go through all of my lovely books that I read for the month of March. So March was an interesting reading month. I read a lot of really good horror stories. I found some new all-time favorite authors and some new all-time favorite books. So I'm really excited to go through everything. I don't know how many people are genuinely interested in stats. I just wanted to quickly review them from my story graph. So to start, my top 3 moods were dark, mysterious, and tense. The pacing, 40% was fast-paced, 10% was slow, and then the other half were all medium-paced books. My page number is interesting. Normally it's the other way around, but we have 70% were under 300 pages, and then 30% were between 300 to 449. They were all fiction stories. And then my genres, so I have 5 horror, 4 LGBTQIA+, 3 literary and fantasy, 2 young adult and thriller, 1 classic, 1 magical realism, 1 short story, 1 mystery, and 1 contemporary. So the first book we have here is Carmilla. This is by Joseph Sheridan. Carmilla is the first sapphic vampire love story. I did check it out from my library first, and then I noticed that they had this version at my local bookstore, and this is edited by Carmen Maria Machado, which I read in The Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. Absolutely loved it. First, we have the cover, which is beautiful. And then throughout the story, you get these beautiful illustrations. So I'm so happy I ended up getting this edition. If you are interested in the story, I do recommend that you get this version because of the illustrations, because of the context provided in the introduction. It just adds to the overall story. I was going to say 5 out of 5, but honestly my rating system feels very flawed. And I don't know. I feel weird about my rating system right now, but I'm just going to go whether I recommend the book or I don't recommend the book and why. This book I would recommend. Next up, we have A Very Nice Girl by Imogen Crimp. This was a reread for me. I initially read this book last year, I think around this time as well. And essentially this story, we follow our main character, Anna. Anna's in her 20s. She's an aspiring singer and she attends a conservatory in London. She struggles financially to make ends meet, so she picks up a lot of side jobs. One of those side jobs is to be a singer. I think it's like a jazz singer at some bar. That detail isn't important. But what's important is that one night at this job, she meets an older man named Max. And he works in finance. He's going through a divorce. They both decide to start seeing one another very casually, more of like a friends with benefits type of situation. And slowly but surely we start to see that Max does become very influential in Anna's life. What I liked about A Very Nice Girl is that it brings an important conversation to what it means to be fulfilled in life through your career. We have Anna on one side who is deciding to pursue a career in the arts to become an opera singer, compared to Max, who takes a more traditional 9-to-5 approach. I would recommend this to people who also enjoy Acts of Desperation, Cleopatra and Frankenstein, Conversations with Friends. Next up, I read Comfort Me with Apples, and this is by Catherine M. Valenti. This is one of those authors that I mentioned that I now want to read more of their books because this short book alone left me wanting more. This book is really hard to talk about without spoiling it, but essentially we have our main character, Sophia. Sophia lives in a place called Arcadia Gardens. It's this lovely little secluded suburbs. The structure of the story is that after every chapter, you get some rules from the tenant agreement. So it tells you every little thing that they have to follow. The first few pages is every traditional tenant agreement, nothing crazy. But as you move on to the other rules, it starts to get a bit weird. On the outside, it seems like everything in Arcadia Gardens is perfect. Everything is made for Sophia. Her husband is respected. She loves her life. One day, she starts to notice these little clues that are left lying around the home. A piece of hair that doesn't belong to her. A brush that doesn't belong to her. it starts to raise suspicion in Sophia. And that leads us to follow through this very mysterious, horrific adventure, I guess. I would say the basis of this story is a retelling of a very well-known origin story, and I don't want to share much beyond that. I will say, if you are somebody who likes Shirley Jackson like I do, I think you will really, really like this story. And if I had to compare it to any film, I would say the suburb feel was very similar to Don't Worry, Darling. The next two books I read on my Kindle. So the first one is The Perfect Marriage by Geneva Rose. In this story, we follow a couple. What is her name? Hold on. Okay, so we have this couple. They live in DC. Adam is an aspiring writer. Sarah is a defense attorney. She has a really good position in her firm. She's doing very well in her job. Sarah ends up buying them a home in the lake for a vacation. It's also a place for Adam to go and work on his books that he wants to publish. Of course, Adam does not spend his time alone. He finds someone that lives by their lake house, has an affair with her for many, many months, and one night she ends up dead in his bed that he shares with his wife Sarah, and Sarah had no clue about it. Because Sarah is a defense attorney, she decides to take on the case, defend her cheating husband, and clear his name. It wasn't the best thriller I've ever read. It didn't leave a lasting impression on me, but it also wasn't the worst thriller that I've ever read. So it landed somewhere in the middle. I don't know if I would watch the movie. I don't regret reading the book. I wish the plot just was a little different. Next book that I read on my Kindle is I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. This book, and I think every other book besides Carmilla that I've mentioned, were all a part of my 24-hour reading challenge, which I think I'm going to post after this video, so you can get all of my initial thoughts and reactions for a lot of these books. I have a lot of mixed emotions about the story, but to do a quick summary of it, essentially we have two characters, Jake and Lucy, and they are headed to go meet Jake's parents. They live in a secluded farm. This is the first time that Lucy's meeting the parents. They sit down for dinner, and the parents are acting very, very odd. Not only that, but Lucy slowly starts to explore the house after dinner. She notices weird pictures. She hears odd noises in the basement, and of course she goes to follow the weird noises in the basement and sees these weird drawings. Everything about it is just weird, and gets weirder as you go through the story. I do want to focus on the positive. So the first one was the way that this book made me feel. I did finish it in one sitting. It is, again, another really quick read. And as I was going, my anxiety started to get worse. I was starting to physically sweat as I was reading because I was so nervous for Lucy, and I felt a sense of heavy dread. And so I do feel like it's important to note, because I do appreciate a book that makes me feel that way when I'm reading it. I highly recommend the audiobook, because apparently after I finished the book, I was really confused on the ending. I didn't understand. I felt like I missed something. I listened to a podcast, and they do recommend the audiobook if you haven't watched the film, of course, because the audiobook explains, there's like this one section, I think it's one chapter, and it just repeats the same thing over and over and over and over again for like 3 pages or something. The audiobook does a really good job of clarifying what happens in that chapter, and then the chapters following. Next up, we have The Dangers of Smoking in Bed by Mariana Enriquez, and I love this short story collection. It's really hard for me to find a short story collection where I like every single story. This one I didn't like all of them, but I liked almost all of them, and I think that counts for something. Essentially, this story is set in Buenos Aires, and it is more of a contemporary horror telling of these various different stories. So a lot of similarities in the themes of these stories include loneliness, rejection, oppression. I would say some of my favorites are definitely The Well, Where Are You, Dear Heart, Meet, Kids Who Come Back, and Back When We Talk to the Dead. The next two are by one of my new favorite authors. They are Bitter and Pet by Okweke Emezi. I can't believe that I have not read anything by them before. Bitter is the prequel to Pet. I actually read Pet first, and then I found out about Bitter, and I went back and I read Bitter. I got these both from my library. I am looking for physical copies of both stories because they are incredible. Both Bitter and Pet have the same setting. They are both set in a place called Lucille. In Bitter, Lucille is still full of monsters and angels, and the start of Bitter is the start of a revolution. Bitter had a really difficult childhood. She was placed in the foster care system. Luckily, she is chosen to attend a school called Eucalyptus. While she's at Eucalyptus, they just want to encourage her to focus on her paintings, focus on her artwork, and she feels like Eucalyptus is a very safe space for her. She doesn't want to focus on all of the negativity outside of those four walls of Eucalyptus. And she struggles because a lot of people at the school are heavily involved in the revolution. And she's torn between feeling hopeless, that there is no change that can be done, while all of her friends are hopeful that they are the start and they are the ones that can enact change within the society. Throughout that journey, Bitter learns that she is still able to positively create and impact the society of Lucille through her art. Something that I really liked about Bitter is that it does focus on the importance of having to take care of yourself before you are able to help those around you. If you're not well, then how do you expect yourself to be able to support someone else? So in Pet, the setting is still Lucille. It's many years later. The monsters have been gone for some time now. Bitter ends up marrying Arlo, which is in the first book, Bitter. And they create a family, and they now have a daughter named Jam. Bitter is still working on her artwork. One day, Jam accidentally brings one of her art pieces to life. And out of the art piece comes Pet. Pet tells Jam that they are a monster hunter, and they are there because there still is a monster lingering in Lucille. I also really like the focus that it has on what is quote-unquote an angel, what is quote-unquote a monster. What someone looks like on the outside does not necessarily have any reflection on the type of person that they are to their core. Sometimes these monsters can be in your community, interacting with your family members, in your home, people that you grew up knowing and loving. I think Akwege Emezi does a really good job of breaking down such a complex situation, breaking down those emotions and simplifying it in a way that's easy to digest for the readers. And even though I know this book is catered and labeled as a young adult, I feel like I would go as far as to say it could be middle grade. Although, well, there is a big trigger warning. There is a mention of child abuse. On top of all of that, there is so much representation through the characters, through nonverbal and verbal communication, and that's something that I don't see in a lot of books. Honestly, there's so many good things to say about this book. If you take anything from this video, it's to read Pet by Akwege Emezi. Hands down, the best book I've read so far for 2023. Okay, second to last book, we're almost done. But I have House of Hunger by Alexis Henderson. Again, another one of my new favorite books and another one of my new favorite authors. We have our main character named Marion. She lives in the slums. They're very, very poor living conditions. She struggles to make ends meet. She has a brother who is an alcoholic. He has a lot of anger issues, constantly stealing her money, has a terrible job. On her breaks at her job, her and her friend look through the newspaper for potential new job postings, and one day she finds a job posting to be a blood maid in the North. People in the North have this belief that essentially if they drink the blood of others, it helps cleanse them, it helps relieve them of all of these medical issues and cures them of sicknesses. I guess in this story, the blood is connected to your trauma. So if you've experienced a lot of trauma, it makes your blood really delicious. So when the Countess at the House of Hunger tries Marion's blood, she's like, oh, you're staying, you're in. So Marion is so excited because now she gets to live at the House of Hunger, which is like this beautiful big estate. They treat them so well. They get to eat all of this food because obviously you need to, make sure that they're in good condition so that their blood is good. She meets all of the other blood maids. They start to interact. The thing is that Marion and the Countess, their relationship starts to develop throughout the story. Marion's ranking goes higher and higher and higher. Once she becomes a head blood maid, she really cannot keep ignoring all of the red flags, and she realizes that not everything is what it was set out to be in the House of Hunger. I loved this book. I thought it was so fun. I did a mix between the audiobook. I loved it so much I went and I got the physical book, and then I reread some of my favorite parts. I love the concept of the story. I love Alexis Henderson's writing style. My favorite was when Marion was going from the south to the north, when she was traveling. The descriptions during that section in the introduction were so rich. It did everything that I wanted in terms of the atmosphere, and the dynamic between the Countess and Marion was super interesting. If Alexis Henderson were to do a spin-off and write a book for each of the houses, I would read every single one of those books. If you liked House of Hunger, I think you would also like A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. And then to wrap the reading month off, we have Nothing But Blackened Teeth by Cassandra Khaw. I think Cassandra Khaw. I hope I'm pronouncing that last name right. This is a novella. It's really, really short. I checked this out from my library. I was able to finish it in one sitting. It's a quick read. It is based off of a Japanese folklore. There is a group of like thrill-seeking friends. They all meet up at this abandoned mansion for a friend's wedding. There is a ghost bride. There is a creepy mansion. I feel a bit torn with this book as well because I really liked the concept. Plot-wise, I feel like it could have been so good, but it just didn't work for me. Since I did really like the concept, if anybody has any other recommendations to either a novella or just a regular book of any more Japanese folklore, please let me know because it did leave me wanting more. But yes, so these are all the books that I read for the month of March. Overall, I would say it was a pretty good reading month. Let me know what some of your favorites were, either some highlights or just some books that didn't work out for you, and what you have planned to read for April. If there are any books similar to some of the ones that I mentioned today that you think I might like, please let me know and I can add them to my TBR. That was it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye. I gotta go watch Succession. It's Sunday.